Greetings, it's I, Tantusnar Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. We are continuing with our final episode of Tabletop today in Spooky Month, Spooktober. So this will be the final of my spookiest topics. This is in fact on Halloween Day, so if you're seeing this live with me on Twitch on Halloween, happy Halloween. If you're seeing it after Halloween, I mean, like, you could have joined me live, but also I hope your Halloween was really good. Because it'll probably be uploaded on like the 1st or 2nd of November. So hope you had a great Halloween. Let me know about that too. That'll just be a little thing. Hey, if you're live on it, you can, talk to me about what we're going to be talking about. But if you're not, you can let me know how your Halloween went. How spooky was it? How was your October overall? Did you enjoy all these topics? I got questions. You can give me answers. But yes, today we're diving back into the 6th world, Shadowrun, with the infected. I'm using the term infected, but really I'm focusing on the HMHVV, which is the human metahuman vampiric virus. And that is what we'll be talking about today, and its derivatives, what it creates, and a little bit about all of that. So that's what we're going to be diving into, going over it and talking about it. I have talked about infected a little bit before when I was talking about some alternate creatures you could play, because there are rules in 4th edition for playing someone infected. There are rules for that, so it's not impossible to, and it certainly from 5th to 4th edition can be adapted. I think there is actually rules in 5th edition too. But we want to talk about this more on the lore, essence side, what it means to be this, rather than the statistical side a little bit today. And we want to talk a little bit more about the virus as a whole, and that's what we're going to be diving into. So why don't we start with that, of course, because it's a great place to start talking about things. Actually, with the books we want to talk about. That's not the first book, that's the last book I'm talking about. That's a map. Just clicking all the wrong buttons today. So we'll start with a number of books that I think you want to check out, because they give you information on those infected by this. Howling Shadows, a newer book. There's also Running Wild, Run Faster, and Threats 2. Threats 1 has some stuff too, but Threats 2 is really the one you want to look at. Is that one better for this? We can do that one picture for that. So those are the books I would recommend you checking out. There are a lot of other books that do mention infected. They're mentioned in places like Augmentation, Cyber Pirates, Man and Mystery Cyberware, New Seattle, in Shadowrun 2050, Shadowrun 2nd Edition, Shadows of Asia and Europe both mention things about them. Some of the Target books, Unwired. There's a lot of these books that do mention infected and information about that. But really those 4 that I suggested, the Howling Shadows, Running Wild, Run Faster, and Threats 2 are the main ones I would say to check out if you want to deep dive into various source books that have information on the infected. But we're basically going to go over a combination of that, about some details I picked up from that books and a bunch of stuff from the online wiki sources. So we're going to kind of combo all these things together. And I hope you enjoy learning about all these different things and the different infected, the different levels of them, and a bunch of stuff. So I think what we're going to start with is defining, of course, the human metahuman vampiric virus, the HMHVV. It's a retrovirus that achieves its virulence and power in magic-rich environments. So it really is a virus which is a magic virus. It actually has existed throughout history, and there are rare occurrences of it expressing itself in the 5th world, which was magically poor. Think about this. Monsters of Legends are representative of this. Effectively, when someone's immune system doesn't stave off the effectum, it systematically reshapes both their aura and genetic code, transforming them into a monster of legend. And it's this transformation into this monster which, before magic came back, some of those legends of vampires, monsters, and ghouls and stuff were caused by people infected by this. It wasn't very easy. Or the virus itself, it was sort of this combination of the virus is still out there. It doesn't infect very good without the magic. You could face it off. It's just there was a lot of circumstances which would lead to people being transformed by it, but it was incredibly rare. Nowadays, magic's more around. Basically, the presence in the body, determined by a number of situations. The Herzog-Grambam blood series and testing for the virus of the self can test for it. There are a number of variations of the virus. There's the HMHVV1, the 2, the 1A, and the 3. Those are the 4 main variations, and we're going to talk about all of them. I'm going to talk about the variation themselves, and then I'll talk about the different things that are created by it, and a little bit about breaking that down that way. So we'll kind of go through that, and we'll go through these things a little bit at a time. So actually, we'll start with the history of this entire thing, when it became known to people. So, the first appearance of it was a variant of it, the Gilani Witch Verde, which started in 2011, and these were the first ghouls observed in Africa. It was completely unclear whether that this transformation was because of the virus itself or just magic and things like that coming around. There was a lot of questions about it. It wasn't until 40 years later that we've proven that this was a variation of the virus during this time period. After Goblinization in 2021, a lot more ghouls were observed. Basically, the mana level triggers for Goblinization were that allowed for the mass expression of the aura-controlled metatype, also allowed the HMHVV variant, which had been within human metahuman DNA until then, to express as to the full virus. It was basically 2 observations of the same phenomena. Magic came back, and then things that were within people's DNA or hidden expressed themselves, whether they were, of course, Goblinization or producing a ghoul. Originally, though, it was compared to be the same thing, that it was those infected being a ghoul to be a form of Goblinization. And it wasn't until 2022 that scientists Jeffrey and Samantha Kringinger researched the ghoul phenomena and discovered the virus, and basically let others know that, no, this is just a virus that appeared during the same time. In 2039, another species of the same virus, designated the HMHVV2, was isolated by John Russell's Jakarta and Michael Criscone. They described transformations triggered by it previously, and had named it the Jakarta or Cryzone syndrome. And basically they found out it was another variant of the same virus. There was a 2046 another subspecies by Richard Bruckner and Gunther Longer had discovered the HMHVV1A and the suffix Sangitsa, which transformed things into Nosferatu. And in 2049, Samantha Krieger succumbed to an infection after years of research on the ghoul phenomena. Jeremy and Krieger finally isolated the third virus to it, the HMHVV3. And in 2051, he died a year later from an infection with the virus he discovered. So by the mid-2070s, though, unexplained intensification of the condition was observed in those affected. The hunger for the respective form of life energy intake sets in more quickly, and experience it more urgent. The typical sunlight allergy has become more significantly more severe, and it manifests in the form of slight itching. It started as itching, and now people with the HMHVV have third-degree burns if they have a sensitivity. So it's sort of like, not only is the coming back, it's becoming worse. It's becoming more pronounced, more powerful. So why don't we break down these different variants and some sub-regional variants, and then we'll break down what the transformations are. So the Galadriel, I'm not going to pronounce this. The HMHVV1 is the primary strain. It was the one isolated in 2034 by Emil Harris and Carla Greenbaum. This is the basic form of the virus. It affects all meta-humanity, transforming them into various new paraspecies depending on where they came from, what they started off as. Despite the differences, all vampiric variants created by this base strain suffer chronic essence loss. So that's an important thing. Your soul basically breaks down. Current theories surmise this condition is similar to the essence loss by an implantation of cyberware. The discrepancy between the subject's natural state and their transformed state being on some kind of level to disrupt the spirit-body interactions. Because that's basically what happens when you lose essence, is the spirit is disrupted from its connection to the body's physical form, and cyberware does that very heavily. BioWare tends to do that a lot less. It's biological. That's why the essence loss for BioWare is a lot less than cyberware. That's the big difference between the two of them. Anyway, though most do admit that this fails to explain those infected by variant strains who do not suffer from the condition, it's like there's ways of it working. So I'll go over the different types of things you become when you are infected, but we'll do that in a minute. We can dive deep into the different variations, and they're very pleasant sounding. Only some infected can infect others. Things like Chirons, Jabberwockies, Lamias, Ninabade, vampires and Wendigos, banshees, chupacabras, goblins, and Zu no Kwa, when created by the virus, do not pass the infection on. Which is a lot of these that I'm going to be talking about here. So, the infection spreads in different ways. There are some regional variations that we'll talk about in a second here. And then we'll talk about the 1A variation. Let's dive into the here some of the types that you have. This is a vampire. Now the thing is, vampires can be found rarely in other metatypes, but they are primarily human. They have a lot of classic abilities and vulnerabilities, but they're not really limited to holy items when it comes to vampires. They are the baseline humans infected by the HMHVV. They prey on sentient beings, absorbing the life essence of their victim along with the victim's blood. So they are draining essence and blood. They're typically thin, pale, suffer from chronic essence loss, which makes them drink the essence of others through their blood. Though not outright killed in the transfer, often finds themselves sharing the vampiric's affliction. Those not outright killed do find themselves sometimes suffering the vampiric affliction. So only some others can affect others, basically. It is what I was talking about. So this is one of the ones that can infect others. More conscientious than other infected metahumans, they are somewhat able to restrain their hunger. Some refuse to drain unwilling subjects. Others revel in their role as predators and killers. They become sick within an hour if they consume anything but blood, and have particularly bad reactions to alcohol. They have enhanced sensitive immunity to age, poison, disease, ability to turn to mist, rapid regeneration from damaged tissues. Many have magical abilities, and sometimes the transformation to a vampire unlocks hidden magical potential. They are capable of learning and using magic just like a human. Vampire sorcerers are maybe the source of some legendary vampiric powers, like changing into animals, mesmerizing victims. They might have just been magic. They have a severe allergy to sunlight and other substances or objects depending on their background. Garlic, wood, silver, holy objects. They're less buoyant than metahumans. They have additional weakness of induced dormancy in the case of lack of air. If you're cut off from air for a period dependable to your actual essence, they fall unconscious indefinitely. If they're exposed to air, they'll regain consciousness then. They are able to pass the infection to others. It's extremely rare of metahuman subtype. Other metahuman subtypes have reported suffering from expressions of the disease, but they're difficult to substantiate for that one. So that's our friend, the vampire, and that's the human-connected one. Let's talk about goblins, because these are dwarfs. They're pack creatures, much reduced in intellectual abilities. These are the dwarf metavariant of the HMHVV. They lose most of their hair and body fat, becoming skeletally emaciated. They gain enhanced smell and taste, chronic essence loss, and rapid regeneration. They lack a lot of the usual immunities of other vampiric-type creatures. They instead have an invulnerability to fire, mild sunlight allergy, and vulnerability to iron. Their diet consists largely of raw meat, presumably with a message which they drain the essence of others. They can spread their infections to others. They prefer their preference for dead prey tends to prelude this in many cases. Their sentience is a debated topic about many parabiological establishments. Most observed specimens have suffered significant loss of intelligence, and many individuals deemed no more intelligent than great apes. Although the UN Committee on Awakened Species have kind of declined for definitive ruling, but already most nations have various protections to avoid future embarrassment should the ruling come out in favor of classifying the sentient. So basically they're like, they're close enough to being smart. Close enough to being smart. I'll switch over to the Wendigo here, but we're not going to talk about the Wendigo yet. We're going to talk about the Banshee before we talk about this dude here, because there isn't really a picture of a Banshee that I wasn't able to find online very easily. But Banshees are elves that have been infected. They're solitary, sentient hunters. They are exaggeratedly tall and gaunt and gain a lot of the vampiric abilities, enhanced senses, immunity to age, poison, disease, mist form regeneration, severe allergy to sunlight, chronic essence loss, vulnerability to wooden objects. They feed on the essence by creating an emotional link with their intended prey by their ability to induce fear. Victims are then pursued to the point of exhaustion, where the bounty proceeds to completely drain them of their essence. Like other vampiric subspecies, they're capable of spreading their infections to others. So that's the Banshee. We have the Wendigo here, who feed on the human flesh and kind of look like white Sasquatches, which are a derivative of orcs. This is an orc variant that has the HMHVV. It is a very extreme expression of the disease. They transform into troll-sized, white-furred humanoid that bears a resemblance to a yeti. They resemble, and regardless of previous awakened status, all examples express shamanic ability, most often of predator totems, which they often use to blend into society and further their aims. They also have a suite of vampiric powers and weaknesses: the senses, immunity to age, poison, disease, rapid regeneration, vulnerability to various metals, chronic essence loss. Probably because of their fur, they only have a moderate allergy to sunlight. They drain the essence of other beings both through the consumption of flesh and a psychic link created by others are induced in joining the creatures in a cannibalistic feast. Usually only end up a meal themselves afterwards. And like the vampiric subspecies, they are able to spread their infections to others. That's our friends, the Wendigos. We'll keep moving on. And here's the troll one, which is the Druznoqua. So the troll have an extreme expression of their regenerative ability, growing elaborate twisted horns, spikes, thick plates of dermal bone over a lot of their bodies. Enhanced senses, rapid regeneration, essence loss, suffering only a mild allergy reaction to sunlight. Though they have been found to be non-sentient, the transformation grants them the ability to resist spells, and some have been found to express other magical skills. They recover essence through the consumption of raw flesh, and like other vampires, are able to spread their infection to others, though most are consumed before that can happen. So the massive, deformed, burning-eyed hulk of a humanoid that is a troll, formally. Now we will move on in images. That's one that will end up it here. before we finish up this one. We'll get to this here. The Jabberwocky, or Jabberwock. It's a Sasquatch that becomes infected. They're also susceptible to virus, and there's very few journals that talk about what happens to them. Jabberwocks are what they're called. Why there's the connection with the Blues Cower Mounds monster, there's no real knowledge of it, but it's been a thing that was discovered later on. This was something that wasn't seen very early on. They were first documented in near the Devil's Towers, Wyoming, in Halloween of 2069, when a passenger plane en route to Seattle from Chicago fell out of the sky with no explanation, some kilometers southwest of the tower, deep in Sioux territory. There were a few survivors. Few of the night went on. One of them had a cyber camera and was able to take images there. They lack the adaptive coloration of the HMHVV infected cousins, the Bandersnatch. It's another one we'll talk about. They possess other abilities that make them formidable hunters. They're intelligent. So basically, unlike the other one, this does nothing to damage their intelligence. They're very rare, tend to stay away from human civilizations. They're difficult to distinguish from their non-vampiric cousins. Their fur darkens to black. Teeth are elongated and sharper than normal. They're hemorivores, subsisting solely on the blood of their victims. They can't hold down food, and alcohol induces nausea. So this is a newer one. There's not a lot of information on them overall. 4th edition, 3rd edition does give some statistics on them. But they are a thing that you can talk about. We also know that there are a few others. Centaurs become Chirons. I can't tell you a lot about them. Marrows become Ninemeve. These are known about, but there's not a lot of information on them. Nagas become Lamias, which they are a monstrous appearance, much larger than that of average Nagas, with spikes and barbulas around the snout. Their fangs are more produced, scales are thicker and darker hued. So basically it's a version of the Lamia. And then we have our friend here that we're finally ending up on, the Chupacabra. It's a genetically engineered creature, or at least it's believed to be, because it has reptilian mammalian DNA and a variant of the HMHVV in its genome. It's bipedal, around 1.2 meters, look like a cross between an iguana and a monkey, head similar to an iguana, opposable thumbs, dark scales, coarse gear. It lives in the Caribbean League in its tropical forests. It has a diet of blood, basically because of the HMHVV genetic material in its DNA, and it gets its blood from goats or cattle. It has been known to attack metahumans from time to time, but this one here can't affect any others, even though it has the virus in its DNA. So it's non-infective, the Chupacabra at very least. But it's related to this entire thing, so Chupacabra. It's a thing that we can talk about. No, I didn't need to get to it. So, anyway. So those are the HMHVV1 that you can kind of affect. Now, there is some variation that can happen on this. There's some geographically localized variants that create distinct vampiric subtypes, not based on metatype, but on the people that they're infecting. The Abbot is a vampire metavariant to the Philippines. It fears seawater, penchant for sucking on the viscera of its victims. The Amalahig is a Filipino-Malaysian vampire that uses a proboscis-like structure on the underside of its tongue to draw blood from its victims. Pangolin are very rare in Southeast Asia as a variant whose astral form consists of just a head and pulsating organs. Those infected are supposed to require a great deal more blood than their kin, and must pickle their bloated bodies, and they can't turn to mist. Instead, they have a toxic breast and need vinegar to survive. And the Sunkian are a Caribbean vampire meta variant that preys on ships, drowning sailors, according to legends. They are subject of a small but lucrative slave trade of the Zop Syndicate. It's rumored that the bulk cores of the Psychon are very pliable, traditional zombie drugs, and need more salt. So they're another variant there. Alright, so we've talked about the HMHVV 1. Let's now talk about a variant of it, the 1A, which we should talk about. So the 1A has some unique things about it, and there are, well, really two that are infected. There aren't as many infected, so there's like less cases for this, but we will talk about both of them. And of course, let's start with a good old classic, Nosferatu. So actually, let's go over the basics of it before we talk about the Nosferatu. It's the Brockner Longer strain, which was isolated in 2046. It's fatal to most metahuman species. Most metahumans die from it. Humans infected express Nosferatu vampires. Recently, there are a small number of trolls that have survived and expressed into Mutak. It's not known if this is a case of mutation or a result of experimentation. And there is one case of an elf surviving it as a Nosferatu. It was proven to be dependent on one particular extremely rare blood type found in particular human and elf subtypes. And so, yeah. So there was one instant by a rare combination of factors that led to one elf being basically sub to it, but I don't know if it's that big one. So we'll talk about the Nosferatu first. So this is, you know, the baseline human, and in that very rare case of, like, you know, this unique, oh, you have the one blood type that's unique and very rare, elves. They're considered to be super vampires. They have all the same traits and powers of the standard vampires, additional to those of a physical adept, like increasing their body and strength twice a day, propensity to higher than average intelligence. They suffer from an extremely reduced essence loss, which does decrease the need for drain essence from others, and lack the vulnerability to wooden objects. They are capable of passing their infections on to others, but often choose not to do so. They're all bald, extremely pale, and possess long fingers and nails. So they're a very powerful version of the vampire in a way. So this one is a rarer version of it, but has some results. Then we have this dude here, the Mutak, which is the trolls infected by it. Their rare monstrosities are grotesquely deformed, stark white skin, heavy muscular, massive claws, teeth, extensive asymmetrical dermal bone deposits. So here's another thing that's, you know, horrible and, you know, affected by it. And that's about all we know about the Mutak. So, this isn't all the variants we can talk about. There's still some more that we can go on about. We have, of course, the next one to talk about, the HMHVV 2. The Jakara Christcone strain, which was isolated in 2039. So, there are two original ones that were known, the Fomorbig of trolls and Luke Guru of humans. The first Harvester was discovered in Houston in 2069, the first Grendel in 2070 in Pittsburgh, and the first Gnaller in Chicago in 2071. Drop bears are a thing. Yes. We'll talk about it. They're not infected but awakened creatures that carry strains of it. We'll talk about it here. So drop bears are an actual thing in Shadowrun. Don't complain to me. It's in actual books. It's actual books have drop bears. Okay? So not infected themselves, drop bears can spread it to others. This is also another poorly understood variant of the retrovirus. It's more common than one, and it's most commonly spread by being bitten or scratched by a carrier, and also spread by unprotected contact with infected bodies, foods, or an open wound. Alright, so let's talk about these different creatures here. We got a bunch of them. We'll start with something similar to a werewolf, the Loup-Garou. Mostly naked dude here. So it's like a Wolfman of Ledger film. It covers with a coat of short fur, mostly gray-black, possesses sharp teeth and claws, and suffers for diminished intellect. It grants them thermographic vision and a depth-like ability to increase their strength once a day and a moderate allergy to sunlight, and acronite or wolfsbane. And for 4 to 6 day period every lunar cycle, they undergo a secondary transformation of greatly increasing the creature's physical abilities and sending them into a killing frenzy where it will attack and attempt to kill any creature comes passes with. Like Formians and ghouls, they don't suffer from essence loss, though like the latter, they are capable of infecting others with on contact, often through bites, scratches, and other wounds. So, like a couple of the others, they don't suffer essence loss from this one. So they're in better shape, but they just get murdery and killery. We'll get back to... Alright. So we will get to this one here in a second. But before we get to it, we'll talk about a dwarf variant. That's not this one here. The Gnars. They develop rough, grayish, rock-like hide, but doesn't lose their mind like other HMHVV2 infected. They're forced to feast on human or metahuman bones. It has led to an odd odd symbiotic relationship between Gnawlers and ghouls. And of course, they were first identified in Chicago in 2071. So this is a variant that requires bones of metahumans to survive, and doesn't really lose its intelligence. So, Gnawlers. We have our friend here, who's a harvester, who is an elf infected by the HMHVV2. They're lone, carnivorous predators, merely a wild animal and very territorial. They've got some general statistics that were introduced in Shadowrun 3rd edition, and they were first identified in 2069 in the Houston, Texas area. Texas area? I can speak English. We have the Grendel here, which is an orc infested with the 2 variant. It was documented, of course, in 2070 in Pittsburgh. Compared to uninfected orcs, they're stronger, matted head of facial and body hair, kind of almost coat-like. Tusks are more prominent, greatly extended arms. They move on all 4s rather than 2 legs at amazing speeds. Little is known about them. They fear cellars of abandoned buildings, abandoned subway tunnels, other underground structures due to their sunlight allergy. They retain much of their orc metatype abilities, like low light vision. They do gain some new ones, like thermographic vision. They also exert an uncanny control of vermin, so they can sometimes be found with entire packs of rats they keep as guards or pets. They're scavengers who, according to previous observations, rarely live together in intimate relationships. They feed on dead animals, but will consume anything they find edible, and do not have a disdain for metahuman flesh. And a large population appear to be thriving in the catacombs of Paris. The average transformation takes 18 days for an orc that has been infected by the HMHVV2. Let us move on, though, because we still have a few more to talk about, and we'll talk about the Formians here. Or the Formagig. They're known for being hairy rather than covered in bone deposits. It's a troll that's been infected with the 2 variant of the virus. The effects are extensive. Enlarged limbs, calcification of the upper skin levels, massive keratinization of hands and feet, and the formation of subcutaneous deposits of bony chestnuts. Glands develop and produce a corrosive acidic fluid. Keratinized plates develop to cover rudimentary gill structures on the side of their long muscular necks. They gain a moderate allergic reaction to air pollution and a virtually non-existent sunlight allergy. Additionally, they enjoy the ability to guard themselves from magical effects. They do not suffer from chronic essence loss, though they have the ability to pass their infections on to others. Don't confuse the Formagigs with Formians. who are just a Celtic variant of troll metatype. So there is a difference, the Forma Rig and the Formian. I'm trying to say the same, that they're different. That's me mispronounced. Yes. I was... They're Forma Rig, not Formian. There you go. And the last one before we talk about a bear is the Bandersnatch, which we did mention earlier, which is a Sasquatch, which is affected by the 2 variant of it. They do not manifest vampiric acids, usually if switched with a virus. Coat is more mangy looking than normal Sasquatch. Strong arms have elongated as the teeth of a carnivore, and they prefer fresh meat, either still alive or recently killed. A supreme advantage that they have is their ability to reflect sunlight around their body, making them invisible to the naked eye. Since it reflects light waves, ultraviolet and infrared wavelengths are affected as well. The concealment effect looks much like that of the Predator from the films. Combined with its mimicry ability of a Sasquatch, they are a powerful hunter then. So very dangerous because of that. And then, of course, the last thing to talk about with this version of the virus is something that's just a paranormal critter, but carries the infection, and that is the drop bear. It is a thing. Yes, they're awakened koalas. They're known for their jet black fur, elongated sharp teeth and claws. They're omnivores. They eat plants and meat. They do still have a dietary requirement of eucalyptic leaves, but they're carriers of the HMHVV too. They're not affected by it. They don't require metahuman flesh, won't starve to death from abstinence. They do not actively hunt their prey, instead conceal themselves in trees with their ability to bend visible light around themselves, kind of almost turning invisible. Once they're under the tree, they drop onto their target, attack with their claws and bites, and even if they survive, they're often infected with the HMHVV2 virus. So, it's a drop bear. Blame Shadowrun 4th edition for this one. It's in the Running Wild book. So if you want to complain about the drop bear existing, blame them. So, we have one more variant to talk about, and that is the HMHVV3, the Krieger strain, which is isolated in 2051. It's the strain that creates ghouls. It is the most virulent of them, and the infection can pass through a bite, scratch, or even a touch if the target has an open wound. It can be passed through contact with any bodily fluids from one already infected. It can also result in partial infection, which requires no essence exchange between the infected and the carrier for the disease to be passed on. At first, these traits of the disease can lead to mistaken conclusion the ghoul transformation is a form of goblization, has been disproven. There are some regional variants of this one, which we'll talk about, but let's dive into ghouls a little bit more. Let me just switch the ghoul picture to the other ghoul picture I have. NPC from one of the video games. They're not undead, they have some vampiric-like behaviors. They must consume about 1% of their body weight in raw human flesh each week. They have a mild allergy to sunlight that inhibits them slightly but does not harm them. They are physically blind, that they are endowed with enhanced sense of smell and hearing, and have astral and physical nature that makes them dual-natured, allowing them to perceive the astral planes. They're especially sensitive to the presence of foreign substances within their body, so it's very difficult for them to use cyber implants on them. Their strength and body are generally greater than that of a normal human, and their intellect and charisma, though, suffers. The one thing about them is they're completely immune to the Vetus Plague. Good for them! Some regress to a feral state after the change, while others retain their sanity. Those who remain sane often undergo plastic surgery to pass for humans, or replace their blind eye with cybernetic implants allow them to see. There is their own country in West Africa, the Ghoul Nation of Asmado, which isn't recognized officially by the UM, but the corporate court. Some regional variants that have been shown, again, it's geographical regions, is the Sanosaman, which are long-lived ghouls who can walk on all forms in West Africa, show up in Mondo. The Busaw, they're allergic to salt and extensive dermal deposits from the Philippines. The Gaki, the Japanese ghoul, have fluorescent eyes and a severe weakness to sunlight. They can actually project as magicians, even adepts or mystical adepts. So, let's finish up and talk a little bit more about the virus as a whole, just to finish up talking about it for today. So, it can easily be diagnosed with a medical test. What happens then? There is no cure. There's been work on a cure for years now, and a cure for the infection, which would include retransformation, just hasn't been found. Vaccine protection even hasn't been seen to be possible for some time. The magical nation of it. Something like the dog shaman Twist tried to heal his Wendigo sister through powerful ritualistic magic. It didn't work. And the thing is, not all infected persons regard themselves as ill, and a lot of defend them the normalization of their condition. So that's another thing too, is some infected can make do in life, so there's a lot of questionable things about it, a lot of times. So, whether it's part of this metamorphosis or not, a lot of the infected have a hard time being among their former fellow beings. Most of it's their food habits. All infected in one form or another are reliant on basically metahuman human life energy. And there's a lot of prejudice that are around them because of this, and a lot of myths that were from past around them. So, yeah. But, there you go. That's the essence of the infected. The story of them. And honestly, it's a interesting kind of thing. As you dive deeper into it, there's a lot of variations on these beings. And certainly, many of them are dangerous. Many creatures are. But there are plenty of them that are relatively non-dangerous. And there are plenty of them that are infectious. Plenty that aren't that infectious or do not choose to spread their infection, and it's sort of like this weird ability of a magic virus that affects and shows up around, and it... Because a lot of times the victims of these things die, that's why there isn't, massive amounts of infection. They kill people in order to survive a lot of times. It doesn't spread the infection that way. But it doesn't mean there can't be spread. It's this weird point in time where it's people that have been physically and spiritually transformed by a virus that is causing them a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, degeneracy and, these wants for blood or flesh or fear to murder people that is driving you. And they are victims of it, but there are those of them that just live with it and find ways to adapt in less violent and deadly ways, and those that don't, and it's a hard thing. And there are plenty of them. Some of them, again, don't retain a lot of intelligence. There are those that do, and are smart, have minds. There's a lot of questions about the entire thing. But they're an interesting case study of an issue, of a problem, of a plague, that its results are still people that have changes to them that could be dangerous. But they are people. It's why things like the Ghoul Nation are in our existence. And yeah, the corporate court hasn't recognized them, even the UN doesn't. The corporate court shows some power there and understands that things like ghouls don't really transmit their disease. Not the same way. Well, they can, but, ghouls don't have as many problems. Anyway, regardless, though, we should end it here. It's an interesting conversation of a topic, and I could probably get into a lot of the metaphysical, psychological, spiritual stuff related to such a thing, but I think it's better left for now just the conversation of what they are and what it means, and understanding that they are a thing in Shadowrun that is a little bit more than your average person getting sick by a virus. It makes you think, and that's why it's a very interesting topic. A little dark of one, but an interesting one. If you enjoyed being with me, thank you for joining me live. Or Thank you for joining me if you're up on YouTube. Either way, it would be lovely if you give me some support, a follow on Twitch, on YouTube, subscription, things like likes, comments, ring the bell. The comment or question for today is, how have you dealt any with, well, other than, hey, how was your Halloween from earlier today? But have you ever dealt with or had anything related to infected in any of your Shadowrun games? I know there's stats for playing infected, but also, not only that, have you encountered them? Ghoul hunts are a thing that exist in some places where there are people that hire you for it. Less now, but they still have been a thing in the past. Or hunts for other infected that are deemed too dangerous. Jobs do take that direction. They're dark. And again, feral ghouls are a thing. So those are the kind of things you understand hunting a little bit more. They lost themselves. Anyway, that's the questions. If you're looking for the schedule for tabletop stuff, we're done the spooky stuff for the year. So we'll get back to a relatively normal schedule. Some stuff still might be spooky. But it's Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays for the live streams. Tuesdays, Thursdays, early afternoon, usually around 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I do them sometimes a little later if I'm doing stuff, sometimes a little earlier, again, for life schedule. And then Saturdays, pretty on the nose around 11. And then it's usually Pathfinder Galarian stuff on Thursdays, World of Darkness stuff on Saturdays, and Tuesdays my grab bag of stuff. Other things, there is the Crimson Queen starting. First episode tomorrow. Hope you join it. Or on the 1st of November. If you don't join it live, check it out on YouTube. It's my new Pathfinder 1st Edition tabletop live stream show. It's going to be a good one. I'm enjoying the setup already. Seems like it's going to be fun. And also discussing tabletop on Saturdays in the afternoon. I also do some gaming streams on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays if you want to check out that stuff. That's about all the things. Social media is Discord and Twitter.com. Links below. A lot of times it's just scheduling updates, random thoughts, things like that. All those kind of things. That's all the shout-outs I've got. So until the next time, I guess I can say, I bid all of you out there a farewell.